Hey y'all, it's your pal Archie Gamble here. Before we get into the meat of today's vlog, I wanted to take a second, first of all, to thank Binky Phillips for taking the time to appear on this episode. What a character this guy is, and what a life he's lived. I'm looking forward to filming the second part of the episode. We did an hour and 17 minutes or something last night. We didn't even scratch the surface of some of the other aspects of Binky's career that I want to get into, and his friendship with Johnny Thunders, and his relationship with The Who, and his relationship as a Who fan, his guitar collection. Just a fascinating guy. But we did touch on quite a bit last night, and we're going to touch on more in the next half of the interview, of his relationship, friendship with Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons of Kiss, and his involvement in some pretty cool Kiss stuff over the years. Now, Binky was kind enough to take the time to sit for an hour and 17, as I said, and he's willing to do more. And he's offered up some pretty spicy tidbits that blew me away, and I'm sure will blow you away as well, as if you're a Kiss fan. And a lot of us are, we know a lot of excruciating minutiae about the hottest band in the world. So all I ask is, I know that Kiss fans can be very defensive about their favorite bands, and if they hear something that they've never heard before, or that they don't necessarily believe is true or don't agree with, they can be very quick to attack, essentially. So all I'm asking today is that you don't do that. You listen to the following hour plus with Binky, with an open mind. I don't think the man has an agenda other than wanting the truth to be out there. And he reveals some pretty shocking stuff and some pretty cool stuff that we never knew about our favorite band. And all I ask people is show some respect, whether or not you agree with what Binky has to say. That's fine. That's what the comments section is for. But I'm just asking off the top, show some respect for this amazing rock and roll figure and the fact that he took the time to do this for us. So enjoy this really cool Kiss content coming up, beginning, middle, and end. And I look forward to part two. Once again, Binky Phillips from the Planets, thank you for your time. You are a true rock and roll warrior and fellow traveler. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, part one of my interview. Gamble Ramble vlog, and I am like a kid on Christmas Day today, very excited to have this guest with us. He is a rare unicorn indeed in the rock and roll vlog world. If you watch my introduction that I filmed, played a little earlier, Binky, I put an introduction on before this, okay, you'll know that this man has been through the wars and has seen so much rock and roll history. It is incredible. I lovingly refer to Binky as the rock and roll Forrest Gump, and by that I mean so many events in the history of rock and roll that I love, he has been part of and been present for, and like smelled the air, and it's incredible to me. So
I always seem to be about 10 feet away. Like, oh, look what's happening over here.
Yeah, at least you were 10 feet away, man. I was 10 planets away. No pun intended. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome to the Gamble Ramble vlog, Mr. Binky Phillips.
Good to be here. We're Archie Gamble fans.
That actually makes me feel very good. Thank you. That's actually, I should start off with that. That's how Binky and I quote unquote met. I see his stuff on Facebook. He's such an interesting guy. Now, again, this vlog is going to be viewed largely by Kiss fans. I do realize that because of your association with the band. But if you look into Binky's life, he's so much more than that. There's so many interesting things. He's a talented and successful musician himself. Massive Who fan, guitar collector, and just been, like I said, just been in so many unique situations. So we're going to start off just a little earlier on. Obviously, you were born John Phillips, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, there's already one rock and roll John Phillips, and would you like to tell the story of Binky, or?
I was Binky by the time I was 6 months old. My parents were having a party, and there was about 20 adults, and they were all drunk and having a good time. and my father had wheeled my crib into the dining room in case I started crying. He wanted to hear me. I did start crying. He went and got my bottle. My bottle was made by the company that makes the pacifiers, Binky, and
Okay.
and on the side of the bottle was their logo, which is the name Binky in script, like a signature.
Ah.
So my father's giving me the bottle, and one of his drunk friends, comes over and leans in and goes, "I say, is everything of Binky's engraved?" And my father immediately picked up the joke. He says, "Oh, absolutely." He says,
Yeah.
we have his Aston Martin downstairs, and within a couple of minutes,
Yeah, sure.
all these drunk adults were like standing over my crib, going, "Are you having tennis today,
Yeah.
Binky?"
Yeah.
And the next morning, my father picked me up out of the crib and said to my mother, "I'm going to take Binky to the park." And my mother went, "Okay." And this is a fact. This is literal. I have never heard either of my parents, well, they're both gone, but I never heard either parent call me John once.
Wow.
Not once.
That is wild. That is
Yeah,
absolutely wild.
it's kind of nuts.
That's a great story. I mean, like it seems like you were almost blessed at birth with a stage name, which is very rock and
Yeah,
roll, right?
I know. It's Binky Phillips does sound very
Well,
does
that's
sound
amazing. I
like
mean, Thunders had to have the name bestowed upon him, like, or you were Binky from birth. So that's amazing. And I know from reading your book, which we will get to also in the conversation, um, that like a lot of people of the 50s and 60s, you were turned on to rock and roll by the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, of course. Prior to that, you were a hot rod racing car fan, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But then, of course, like millions of other kids of your age, you saw those four shaggy heads and
yeah.
said, "Mom,
It
this is
was
what I want to do," right?
it was the phrase life changing is thrown around kind of loosely, uh, but the Beatles on Ed Sullivan on February 9th, 1964, literally changed my life. I mean,
Yeah.
I all of a sudden I know what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. And I mean, just to give you an idea of how bad I got bit, I had my first guitar lesson 3 days later on February 12th. I'll tell you, here's a very quick story. Uh,
Yeah.
I met Tom Hanks, and it was February 9th, 2015, and we were standing in the middle of a diner in Brooklyn. Very weird. I don't know what he was doing there, but and all I said to him was, "You know what today is?" And he looked at me and said, "Changed our lives forever." I didn't have to say
Exactly
anything
right.
other than anything but, "You know what today is." And he immediately knew what I was referring to. So that's
That's incredible, man.
it was the baby boomers. It can't be over. I mean, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan dwarfed Woodstock.
Yeah.
Woodstock's nothing compared to the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
You know
Uh,
what? It's funny. I've never thought of it that in terms of that before, in terms of influence.
well,
But yeah, you're absolutely right.
in terms of a cultural shift, and Woodstock was a cultural shift. But I mean, Woodstock went like this. The Beatles went like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It
That's
just
awesome.
everything changed overnight. It was wild. It was wild, and it set me off. I was if a band was from Britain, I was in. I bought that album, and
You're an Anglophile. Well, of
yeah,
course, being Binky the Third, or
you
Binky the
know,
First, rather, you're an
I,
Anglophile. Of course, you were. You were
I,
born to the manor, as they say.
yeah.
I have to ask you, Binky, like being a guitar collector, when this happened, like, do you remember? Like, I know a lot of the answers to these questions from reading your book, but I'm asking for the benefit of the people watching. What was your first guitar?
Well, my very first guitar was my father's guitar. My father had a classical gut string guitar, And when I just was talking about having my first lesson, he was the one who gave me my lesson. He had picked up the, just completely by coincidence, just one of these lucky little things in my life. My
Yeah.
father started playing guitar about 3 months before the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, is that right? So there you go. You had a bit of a jump
He
start
had a
compared to
guitar.
the kids that saw it and then wanted. You could probably only play a few chords.
Yeah, I didn't have to say, Daddy, Daddy, get me a guitar.
Yeah,
Please
yeah,
buy
yeah.
me a guitar. Please buy me a guitar. All I had to do was say, can I play your guitar?
Yeah, that makes
And
sense. Now
and
here's
he
let me ask you the follow-up to that
I
question.
actually still
Well,
have it in a closet down the hall. I still have my dad's guitar.
pardon me. Oh, wow. I didn't mean to cut you out because I was going to ask that was going to be the follow-up. That's amazing that you still have it. Do you remember
Yeah.
your first good guitar or your first guitar that was considered yours that you picked out?
Well, I'll tell you what. My first, I saw when the Stones came out. I didn't abandon the Beatles, but I became a huge Stones fan,
Yeah,
and Keith Richards was my favorite Stone,
my
and
hero.
I saw them doing Heart of Stone on Ed Sullivan, and Keith had a Sunburst Les Paul, and it was the first time I'd ever seen one, and I fell in love with the shape of that guitar and the look. And on my 12th birthday, my father bought a $60 replica.
Yeah.
Uh, it was, small body, one cutaway, two
Mhm.
pickups, and it was a company. It was made by a company called Zimgar, and
Yeah, okay.
a piece of junk. And amazingly enough, I actually have one. I have one down the hall. I have the first guitar I ever owned. And anyway, so it's an electric guitar, and
Mm.
that and I once I got the electric guitar, the guitar went from something I was interested in to my life.
Yeah.
And I played all day. I learned every, Kink song, every, Gloria by them, Small Faces, any song that was easy, any song that was three or four chords, I
Sure.
would learn. And I wound up with a little band of schoolmates. And we probably did like 20 songs. I don't think we did any Beatles songs because they were too complicated.
Yeah, there's too many minors and those F7s and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, they doing? Yeah, I know. They really, their shit was really sophisticated. It
Yeah.
really was.
Oh, they
Uh,
were. I mean, I've always looked at them as a combination of kind of Motown backbeat with Everly Brothers harmonies, you know.
you know what? That's interesting. A friend, Richie Teeter, God bless him, was the drummer of the Dictators, and for about 2 years he was the drummer of the Planets after the Dictators, and he said that the first time he heard the Beatles, he said to himself, wow, the Everly Brothers being backed by the Ventures, cool.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. So I think that's even more prosaic, right? Yeah.
It never occurred to me, but it was like simple electric guitars with those beautiful harmonies. Anyway, so I landed. I loved this band, that band, this band, that band, and then I saw the Who, and that was the Beatles changed my life, and then 2.5 years later, the Who changed my life,
Yeah. Now,
and
yeah, that's one of the topics that I have to get to because you are well known worldwide throughout the galaxy, let's say, amongst hardcore Who fans for
yeah.
reasons we will get to shortly. I'm just kind of going chronologically here. So
Oh, that's
if I
fine. Go
could
ahead.
backpedal just a tiny bit.
No, anything.
So once you got into playing, you started very young, like myself, and you were neighborhood bands and things like that. And you ended up going to high school. You went to the High School of Performing Arts, right?
No, High School of Music and Art.
High School of Music and Art.
There,
That's
there
different
was
from the High School of Performing Arts.
there were three specialty high schools in New York:
Yeah,
the High School of Music and Art, High School of Performing Arts, and High School of Art and Design. Those were
didn't
the
realize that.
so if you wanted to be a fine art artist or a classical musician, you went to the High School of Music and Art. If you wanted to be a commercial artist, you went to art and design. And if you wanted to be a performer, a dancer, a singer, an actor, you went to High School of Performing Arts. Now, it would make more sense that I went there and someone we're about to talk to went there, but we both. What happened was music and art. Music and art was very female heavy,
Okay.
especially the art department. The music department was pretty 50-50, but
Yeah.
the art department was like 70-30. So if you could draw a circle, you know, that you got in, and that's how I got in, and that's how Paul got in, which isn't to say that, I mean, I could draw, and Paul could draw, but it was really kind of a trick, it was like,
Yeah.
I
If you
snuck
could draw a circle, that's where Paul Stanley's fixation with circle art seems
Yeah,
to come from.
I snuck in. I snuck in. Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, so I guess should we talk about this?
Yeah, well, that's actually just what I was going to say. For those of you that are just joining us and may not know, KISS history, it's well established. Another student at that school was Stanley Eisen,
Yes.
later known as Paul Stanley, and Binky and he became friends. And they're the only two kids in school with Gibson guitars, apparently, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I was walking east on the third floor. He was walking west on the third floor. As we passed each other, we looked at each other's guitar cases.
Yeah.
And the thing about Gibson cases is they're very you can back then they were
Yeah.
very very identifiable. I mean, they were very high end, very classy, well made cases. So I
Sure.
looked at him and I went, this guy's got a Gibson. And Stanley looked at me and went, "This guy's got a Gibson." We stopped in the hallway,
Yeah.
and I said, "What do you have?" And he said, "A Les Paul Special." And he said, "What do you have?" And I said, "A Les Paul SG."
Yeah.
And I looked and I noticed that the room we were standing outside of was empty. And I said, "Come on, let's take a look." And
Nice.
we went into this empty classroom, and he opened up his case. I opened up my case. I looked at his, he looked at mine. We talked about, this and that and the other, about, oh yeah, this tone, and I like the thing, and whatever. We just did guitar talk. And we closed up our cases. We shook hands. I'm Stanley Odds, and I'm Binky Phillips. And that was like maybe October 1970, uh,
Okay.
maybe November, but it was early fall.
Just
Uh,
near the beginning of the school year.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like maybe a month into the school year, and
Junior?
yeah, I was a junior, and Paul was a senior,
Oh, I
and
see.
he's a year older than me, and so for the rest of the year, we saw each other on a regular basis, like hanging out in the hall or hanging outside, or like bumping each other in the lunchroom. Uh, and then he graduated, and I stayed because I had another year, and we kept in touch because the two of us had the same problem with jam sessions. This
Yeah.
was the blues explosion was happening. John Mayall and Paul
Sure.
Butterfield and BB King, and so everybody was doing blues jams. And Paul and I had the same complaint. We were never allowed to play lead guitar. We had to only play rhythm. And
Yeah.
the thing about, if you're playing rhythm guitar with the blues, after about 10 minutes, you're pretty freaking sick of it.
In 12 bars, right? Yeah. Yeah.
There's not that much to do. So we bonded on that issue that it's, and then I think we kind of lost touch for most of 71, but then he called me, and I told him, he was like, we had like a reunion over the phone, and
Yeah.
we started talking about equipment, because that's what guitar players do. I'm
Sure.
sure drummers do the same thing.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
so I'm telling Paul that I now own a 1959 Les Paul, and that I
You
now
had the 59, but oh, God.
and I now have a 200-watt high watt head. Now, high watt was not in America. There was
That's
not
right.
one.
Yeah.
wasn't one fucking high watt in America. I had literally the only one. I bought it off a Bloodwind Pig, who was a.
Yeah.
They were
The
like
English folk rock band, right? Yeah.
it's kind of blues rock. Off, they were an
Blues rock,
offshoot
okay.
of Jethro Tull.
Yes.
Mick Abrahams, the guitar player, the original guitar player of Jethro Tull, left and started Bloodwind Pig. They came to New York, and I bought the bass players.
Amazing.
200-watt
And it was a 200 watt.
200, yeah, sick. It was like stupid loud. It was like, what the fuck are you doing loud? It was, are you turn that fucking down? It was great. It was insane. Anyway, so Paul was like mind blown. He was mind blown about the 59 Les Paul
Yeah.
and especially the high watt. And a couple of months after that conversation, I bumped into Paul outside of the Academy of Music on 14th Street. We were both going into a Jeff Beck show,
Oh, nice.
and we hadn't seen each other like in a year. And Paul had looked the last time I'd seen him, he looked really goofy. I mean, he had
Yeah.
Prince Valiant haircut, mutton chop sideburns. He was kind of chubby, and all of a sudden he just looked great. His hair was like it was like Paul Stanley hair,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he slimmed down, and he was really happy to see me. I was really happy to see him, and he turns to this big tall guy who's standing next to him, about 6'3", and he goes, "Gene, this is the guy with the high watt 200." And Gene Simmons like leans in and goes, "You have a 200, a high watt 200?" I said, "Yeah, I have a high watt 200." From that day on, from that moment to today, Gene Simmons respects me as the guy that has the high watt 200. It's hilarious.
That's incredible.
I mean, 10 years later, he would bring it up and go, "You had a high watt 200." I was like,
That's amazing, Binky. What a great story that is, man. That amp
well,
must have roared too. Jesus.
I do. Here's a touch that's important, I think.
Yeah.
When Paul turned and said, "This is my friend Gene," he plays bass in my band, Wicked Lester.
Yeah, yeah.
I heard the name Wicked Lester that one time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's funny, because that's that they recorded that album.
Yeah.
CBS, I believe, or Epic, one of the two, and
Yeah.
they had the album finished in the can. Gene and Paul walked away from the project and wanted to go heavier, right?
Paul and Gene called Epic and said, "Please don't put it out."
Yeah.
I mean, that's how bad they hated it. It's like, don't even please don't. I mean, what do we have to do on our end of the contract to get you to not put it out? And and Epic was like, "Fuck it, we don't care." You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want.
yeah. Well, kudos to them for doing that. I mean, I have to.
No, it was very ballsy. It was, it showed, it showed an extraordinary determination
Yeah,
and focus, and they didn't have the vision for Kiss yet,
yeah.
but they knew that they were not Wicked Lester.
That's right. That's right. And you can tell that they seem to become kind of one mind too. They finally met the person that had the same ideas as them.
Yeah, I
But
think they had just there are two bands that Gene and Paul loved and who I think are really bedrock influences on Kiss, and that's Humble Pie and Mountain.
mm,
Uh, Very huge influence on both those guys. Gene's
yeah.
all-time favorite song is "Never in My Life" by Mountain. I mean,
Well,
he
I
told
can
me,
hear some of the Mountain influence in some of the early Kiss stuff,
"Oh yeah,
especially on Hotter Than Hell, like Going Blind and songs like that.
oh
Sound like
yeah, yeah."
theme from an imaginary Western. You
Well,
know?
and the same with Humble Pie. All those, I mean, their version of "I Don't Need No Doctor." I mean, and Stone Cold Fever. I mean, those sound like Kiss songs.
Yeah, that's true enough, right?
You
And
know,
Paul's stage presence was very much, you can see here, influenced by great Steve Marriott,
well, he was,
almost
yeah,
preacher in a rock and roll
he worships,
evangelical
yeah,
manner, right?
he worships Steve
Yeah.
Marriott.
Now
Uh,
I have to say, Becky, I just want to step back a little bit while we're still in the early stages of it's interesting to me when you explained to me about meeting Paul. I didn't realize the age gap between you guys. And because you've always struck me as a very gregarious guy who seems to have a lot of friends.
Yeah,
But I
I
could see that
was. I'm
Paul,
not
we
sure
know,
about now, but I was in
well,
my
yeah,
youth.
Paul, we know famously was not much of a social
Right.
butterfly. Didn't have a lot of friends, so it's interesting the dynamic to me hearing you tell that story. I've never thought of this. He's a few grades up and a little older, and for him
Uh,
to reach out and that's very un-Paul Stanley like behavior.
well, look, there's you cannot overstate the importance of those two Gibson guitars.
Yeah,
Yes, Paul was not as outgoing as I was, but those guitar, it, there was a mindset. And you're a drummer, you know that you know this. I mean, if you walk into a club and there's a like really cool old Gretsch set on the stage. I mean,
yeah, you
you
got to
want
talk to the guy,
you want,
right?
you want to meet the guy. You want to find out how old it is. What did he
Yeah,
pay for it? Is that really the
yeah,
arcade 7 that you got there? You know that. So that it was it alleviated for both of us. I mean, neither one of us had a
sure.
moment of awkwardness. It was just like, yeah, let's look at our guitars,
Yeah,
and
straight to friendship, right?
it was just like bang, we were off and running.
Well, it's amazing to me because it must have been somewhat of a lifeline or a relief to Paul Stanley at the time. Because if you read his book and you read interviews, he was a very unhappy child and teen almost till they found rock and roll, it seems. So I mean, really, if you think about it, I don't know if you can overstate the importance to paraphrase you of that meeting because he finally had a friend. He finally had someone that had the same love and interest as him, and it
Yeah.
probably felt really good to him. I would imagine, made his life a little easier.
I don't remember anybody specific, but Paul was not. I don't want to paint him as a loner,
Hmm.
um, but he was. He had a little circle of friends in the I think
Okay.
he. But not if he did. I mean, I was one of them. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
we had a circle. It was maybe four of us, and he was. Uh, uh, he was insecure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure he ever got over that insecurity.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. And I mean, I'm only by what he has allowed the public to see in interviews and in his book and things like that. Um, I'll give him kudos for owning up to being insecure and owning up to seeing a therapist and taking steps towards
Yeah.
working on it. My personal experiences with Paul Stanley, there's been a couple times I've had to shake my head and go, "You have everything in the world. I don't understand why you're insecure." But that is how those things work. You can never really understand what another person's going through. But I'm glad he had a friend in you, is kind of my point, if that makes sense.
Well, we enjoyed each other's company. I mean, it was. I
Yeah.
mean, our friendship. Uh, by the time Kiss was up and running, was much deeper than my friendship when we were in high school.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Well, that's cool. Well, you
I,
know what? And
I
if
became,
you
I,
don't mind, we'll get to that for sure.
yeah, I became once he got signed. I mean, here's the thing: he and I were both like had the same exact goal: get signed by a major
Yeah.
label. All right, so we were like we were. I never felt to this day. I don't feel jealousy. I feel envy because envy is, gosh, I wish I had what you had.
Of course.
Jealousy is, I wish I had what you have and that you didn't.
Yeah.
And I've never felt that. Paul earned everything.
Yeah.
Those guys, that band busted their asses. That band from like 73 to like 79, 80. I mean, they were. I know because I was there. I mean, Paul was on the phone with me 2 or 3 times a week. Um,
Mhm.
they had more or less 2 weeks off, like a regular job. And
Amazing, eh?
if they weren't on tour, they were in the recording studio,
Yeah.
and it was like they were, and it was, um, of course it was fun, but fun didn't have anything to do with it, if you know what I mean. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah. It was Drive, right?
it was Neil Bogart saying, I've put $1.7 million into you guys.
Yes.
When are you gonna write a hit? You know, so they had a lot of pressure on them because they had gotten a lot of money from Casablanca, you know, I mean, there's stories of how broke they were. Um, at any rate, uh, once he was a recording act and on the road, every time he came back to New York, I don't want to be uh, I don't want to be cocky because I don't know if this is completely true, but more or less, I was the first person he'd call.
Yeah.
He'd get back into New York and he'd call me up and he'd go, "Let's go to dinner. I got so many fucking stories. You're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe what happened in Minneapolis, that kind of stuff." Um, and we like this is like the quintessential uh, Binky and Paul story of with him on the road and me sitting in my apartment. My phone rings at around midnight, which is a little kind of on the late side, and I pick it up and I hear Paul's voice go, "Did I wake you?" And I said, "No, I'm watching fucking TV." He said, I gotta play you something." And I said, "Where are you?" And he goes, "I don't know, either Tulsa or Oklahoma City. I don't know which one."
Yeah.
And he said, "Hold on, let me plug my guitar into the pig nose, which is like a little amp."
Yeah, yeah. Little battery power practice amp. Yeah.
And then he hits a chord and he goes, "Can you hear it?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard it." And he said, "I really love this riff. Tell me what you think." And he played me the riff to "I Want You." Bump.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, you know, and he did the riff like four times. Then he came back on the phone and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's the best riff you've ever come up with. That is
Amazing, man.
that is badass." And he goes, "I have no idea where to go with it. I don't know what I do with that riff." And I said, "You'll figure it out." And I think he
Yeah.
did. That's a great song. I mean, he did find the right chord changes out of that riff. But that is who I was.
Yeah.
You know, it's not who I am now, but at that point in his life, I was the guy he would call at midnight to play a riff he had just come up with in his hotel room.
Sure. And you know what's funny? But I think that speaks to you and your friendship because Paul doesn't strike me as the kind of person who will call up just anybody to do that. He would have to feel a certain comfort level to trust you with exposing,
Yeah,
opening his heart and saying, "Here's my music. What do you think?" You know, maybe that's my take on it.
we were both very enthusiastic, excitable boys, and we both had a real heavy dose of New York cynicism. So we you know we bonded on the fact that one of the things that New Yorkers pride themselves on is you can't bullshit us. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
of course you can, but we believe you can't. And I think that kind of dynamic, that New York thing where I could say anything I wanted to him and he could say anything he wanted to me,
sure, that makes
uh,
sense.
was a well
Are you that? Why I got a
thing.
freezing on my end. Binky, you there? Or freeze? You're frozen on my end. Okay, you're back.
The Paul I was dealing with, the Paul I was friends with during you know, Dress to Kill and Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun, was a different guy than he became. He was like more,
Sorry, folks, we're getting a freezing on the screen here. Thank you. Sorry for your freezing on my end. I apologize.
like mind blown by it, but he was he wasn't taking a second of it for granted, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, "Oh my God, I've done it. I'm a rock star." and he didn't sit back on his laurels. He didn't, he didn't slink off and get moody or anything. He dove into it, and I really appreciated that, because that's what I intended to do. And that was the thing. I mean, my relationship with Paul, we were both going to get signed. We were both going to, and I was going to get signed. I had 5 labels that wanted to sign me, and my manager turned all 5 of them down. And then word got around to all the other labels that these guys don't want to get signed. So nobody else was interested. It was a disaster. It was like the worst thing that ever happened to me professionally. Just a terrible, terrible manager.
Well, and I understand. I mean, you always, perhaps management's thinking that they can get the bigger deal, the better deal, whatever it is. And that's actually one of the questions. I canvassed people for questions that they wanted me to ask you. And a friend wanted to know what you think was maybe the stumbling block that kept the planets from the success they deserved. You know, I'm glad we're talking as we are. Just I wanted to step back with say, first of all, before we probe that, the Planets is such a cool name, and I have to ask you: did you come up with that as a young man?
Yeah, we were we had the personnel. We had the band: Andy, Steve, John, and me, and we didn't have a name, and we were kicking around names for weeks. And I remember Chinese Martians was one of them, and flying saucers, and
Yeah,
the green peas was one. Um, the thank you note. I mean, just all kinds of ridiculous names. And one day I'm in our lead singer's apartment, and we're smoking pot, and I go over to his collection of singles, and I pull out a single by The Creation, a song called Biff Bam Pow, and Creation's record label was Planet Records.
so
And I
that's the
looked
inspiration.
and I looked at the word, and if you think about it, the word planet is a really nice solid word. The P, the L, the A, the N, the E, the T,
Yeah,
S, they're all very big solid. There's no eyes, there's no skinny eyes, it's like a nice big solid looking word.
yeah, yeah.
And I saw it on the record label, and just like completely casually, the other 3 guys were there. I said, "What about the planets?" And everybody went, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. The
No,
universe handed you a good gift, right?
oh God, that's it. It was
Yeah.
just like, yeah, all right.
Oh yeah, but still, you know what? I have to say, to this day, it would work. Like, to me, it's not
Oh, yeah,
it's not like the amazing, exploding, inevitable, or you know,
strawberry alarm clock.
yeah, it's not. It doesn't have sound dated. You could use it in any era of rock and roll from the '60s till now, which I
Yeah.
love about it. So, touching on the, I'd like to focus on what went well, but I mean, at the same time, you may not have attained the goal of signing the record deal you wanted to sign, but you guys certainly had a very large following in the New York City area. And you were definitely part of the history of the transition of kind of glam to punk. You guys were,
That
you're in that encyclopedia as far as I'm concerned,
you just hit upon the single uh, the single unique thing about the planets in the history of New York rock. We were the only band that came out of the glam era of 72, 73 and transitioned successfully into the CBGB era of 64, 74, 75, 76.
Yeah.
All the other, I mean, there were other bands that from, glam bands like the Brats. They had the Brats continued to play gigs, but they wound up kind of they wound up
Outdated.
they just wound up sidetracked.
Mhm.
They didn't I mean, they never played CBGBs, just as an example.
Yeah. Would they have fit in? That's the question too. I mean,
Yeah, they
something
were,
about what you guys brought to the table with the Planets, which
the
worked. It had enough punk attitude.
Well,
that
we
fit in
had
with punk, but enough musicianship that rockers loved it too. I feel, from what I know of
yeah,
it, you know.
yeah, we were one of the finest compliments I ever got was Tommy Ramone, the drummer, called me a virtuoso, which is like he was the brains and the architect of the Ramones. So
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Wrote the songs, produced the records, you know.
the only one who I never really knew was Dee Dee because he was just too crazy. But Joey was very friendly. Joey and I bonded over the Who. Joey was, I don't know how well known this is, but he was a huge Who fan. Uh,
Yeah.
and Johnny and I didn't really get to know each other until the 80s. But we kind of we almost, I mean, the honest truth is we almost didn't fit CBGBs. I mean, we you know we were my rhythm section could do a really good
Yeah.
approximation of Entwistle and Moon.
Yeah.
I mean, we really could like
They could
blast.
play.
They could really play. Our singer was. Let's put it this way: Willie DeVille hated our singer
Jealousy.
because Willie DeVille knew that our singer was better than him.
Yeah. And Willie was the king of the scene, and he
Willie was,
felt a threat, perhaps.
Willie was a true talent,
Yeah.
and a guy with a vision. But he like Paul, he was insecure, and he was very insecure about our singer. Now so we kind of didn't fit. I mean, we you know most of the musicians. I mean, television were guys that could really play, but that punk ethos of like
Yeah.
anybody can do it, buy a guitar and learn two chords. We were well past that.
Sure.
So
Sure.
you
But you
know,
had the snarl and the attitude.
oh yeah, no, we had the well, we had the energy level and yeah, and the firepower.
Yeah.
Uh, you
I
know,
think that's why some punks found the Who was not on the list of dinosaurs. Like they hated Led Zeppelin, they hated all these other
yeah,
bands, but the Who were cool because they had the firepower, as you just so perfectly put it. I think that your band possessed the same thing, which is why you were embraced by the scene. Again, I'm looking at it from the outside, looking in,
right.
you know. But I think that's a great thing if you can combine musicianship with attitude. You know.
Yeah, we were the punk band that could really play our instruments.
Yeah.
That's who we were, and we had a singer who could really sing, which was a huge. I mean, the only guy in the same league as Tally, my singer, was Willie. I mean,
Yeah.
Willie and Tally were the two singers, and there were the other singers. I mean, Joey Ramone was fantastic, but he wasn't a singer. He was a personality. The same with Debbie Harry. Debbie Harry didn't have a 4-octave range and a powerful voice, but she had
Sure.
she had a vision. She had personality. So the planets kind of stood outside of the whole thing. We were, I mean, we were part of the scene in as much as we played CBGBs regularly. People dug us. We got, we got encores and whatever, but we didn't fit. Once the Dead Boys showed up from Cleveland.
Yeah.
Is it Cleveland? Is that where they're
Yeah,
from?
Cleveland. Yeah, they were from Ohio, definitely. Yeah.
Um, the CBGBs became. It was like a weird thing where punk started at CBGB's with the Ramones, and then it went across the ocean to Britain.
Yes.
The English came up with a much more dazzling visual version of,
Absolutely.
and
And a
they
political message. Whereas
yeah,
American punk was more,
yeah,
I
I
want to
want
sniff
to
some glue, I don't want
yeah,
to go down in the basement, you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
But what happened was the British punk got got bounced back to CBGB's, and a band like Dead Boys, who were actually an Aerosmith cover band. So,
Oh, that's
so
right. Oh, wow.
they saw what was happening in England, And then they found out that what was happening in England was happening at this club CBGB's.
Yeah.
And the punchline I'm coming to is that CBGB's went from being a music club to a punk club.
Yeah, makes sense.
So during the first year and a half, the planets were completely welcome because the pure eclecticness of CBGB's roster was part of the appeal. Was that you never
Sure.
knew,
Country blues, bluegrass.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're
The
gonna
names of it all, right?
right. Are we going to see somebody like burning their guitar? Are we going to see three girls singing in harmony? You know, it was
Yeah. Yeah, television, and then on the other hand, you got Blondie, then you got you guys, and but then when it became more punk leaning, as you say, it became of kind of the punk headquarters of New York, right? I guess would be fair to say.
well, it's kind of practically the punk headquarters of the world. CBGB's was, I mean, my daughter had her Sweet 16 party at CBGB's.
Is that right?
It was her
You
idea.
got to be the coolest dad ever.
No, no, but
That's amazing.
it wasn't. It was. I have a cool daughter because it was her idea.
Well, then while you raised her, so that you've got to get some credit there.
So the party was 4 hours long. It was my daughter's birthday is June 12th, so it was a nice warm day, and there was 80 kids and running around like crazy people on CBGB's, and I would like every 15 minutes or so, I would duck out to get some fresh air and just get away from the noise because they had the PA going, their mixtapes, and 16-year-old girls like shriek like it's like, ugh. Anyway, every time I went outside, there would be a group of tourists, maybe Asians, European, Indian. I would walk outside and there'd be like 3 or 4 people taking pictures of the facade and like pictures of them standing in front of the facade pointing at it. And
almost like a Buckingham Palace or the Eiffel Tower or
it was
something,
like,
right?
it happened like I walked out like maybe 6 or 7 times. Every time I walked out, that was CBGB closing was a real blow to New York City. That was an absolute tourist attraction. People would come from all over the world to go to that place. I managed a band in Dallas.
Okay.
And they did a one of those like rock questionnaires, like some fan magazine or something. One of them that the favorite color, and one of the questions was most thrilling experience. And all 5 guys wrote, play CBGB's. We played CBGB's. We played CBGB's. We played.
Yeah.
That was the most thrilling experience of their life.
Amazing, isn't it? Well, I mean, it's pretty high up there in the rock and roll hierarchy, right?
It was an incredibly special place. All the hype or myth that you hear about it, it had. You walked in and you felt something immediately. I mean, immediately. It was like the air was crackling. It was great. It was great. Great time to be in to be a 25-year-old musician.
That's incredible, man.
I
never got the opportunity to play them. I was a little too late, but I did play Arlene Grocery, where your band, The Planets, had a residency for a while, and the whole Lower East Side to me was so. I was walking through it, looking for the Ramones shot a picture against that brick wall. Arturo's Loft was over here. Like there was, I went to John Varvatos just to look at it, just to smell the air. You know what I mean? So I got the secondhand experience. And I wanted to ask you, if I may, I'm looking at things. There's so much I wanted to talk to you about the planets and your Who fandom and your guitar collection and stuff. We're running out of time on this particular one. Would you be willing to maybe do a second part?
Yeah, we can do another one.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but if I got so much to ask you.
I would enjoy it. I'm having a good time, sir.
Me too, man. You're
a great host.
Thank you for this. Like I know your time is valuable. Kim, how about this? This one's getting a little we're pushing the clock. So to keep the Kiss fans happy,
Okay.
we'll maybe talk a little bit. Oh, I had a bunch of questions between now and Kiss to ask you about the planets and your life and your guitars and things and your career, which we will ask. But you mind if I jump in a couple quick Kiss tidbits to feed the fish?
I can, yeah, I'm totally, I think, uh, maybe, attending their third rehearsal is something that you probably would like to hear about.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. It's actually in my notes. I know that being like an online friend of yours, you sometimes post some really cool tidbits for people. And if you could tell us about that, you got to attend the rehearsal where they rehearsed
Well,
one for Ace Frehley, and they wanted you to come down and kind of check out as a player and see
yeah,
what you thought. Can you
right.
tell us
Yeah.
about that, please?
Yeah. Paul had, Paul had been talking to me on a regular basis about their frustration trying to find a lead guitar player. They didn't have a name yet. They had Peter, and it was, Paul and Gene, but and one day Paul called me up and he said, "Listen, I think we might have found the guy." And he said, "We've had him come down twice, and I think this is the guy, but I really want your opinion." Which is, again, I'll give you an idea of the kind of relationship he and how the respect he had for me and that I had for him. And I said, "Sure, I'll come down." So a couple of days later, I went to what is it, 10 West 23rd, or no, 10 East 23rd. Anyway,
Yeah, by
yeah,
the Flatiron Building, right by
yeah,
across from Madison Square Park.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I went up to the fourth floor. It was one of those elevators with the cage that
Binky, if I can interrupt, because trust me, I'm going. This is important. Kiss fans have been debating this for decades. What floor did you say they rehearsed on?
I think my memory is the fourth.
Okay, because they started off on the fourth, and then they eventually moved. They got a room on the first or second, and Kiss fans to this day are arguing over whether they. We all know they started on the fourth, but they don't know
Yeah.
whether they moved to the first or second. And I was going to ask you that, but that's just
I'm,
minutia. Please continue your story. My apologies.
I,
I'm a
I
Kiss
think
nerd, as you can see.
I think I saw when I saw them. I saw them in their first space
Yeah,
at 23rd Street.
yeah. Sorry.
Anyway, the building was awful. I mean, the walls were like chocolate brown. Who paints a hallway chocolate brown?
Yeah.
Anyway, they I opened the door and it's a room, I would say maybe 15 by 15, and there's a Marshall stack and a SVT Ampeg bass amp and a drum set and the PA facing in, and it's just a classic setup for a band rehearsing. And Paul and Gene and Peter were already there, and like, small talk, ha ha ha. And the new guy isn't here yet, so we sit around talking a little, and it starts getting a little embarrassing. And Paul says, "Why don't we play Binky the three songs?" And I said, what do you mean the three songs? He said, we've taught this new guy three songs.
Okay.
So they played, I want to do it in order. Deuce, Strutter, Firehouse.
Okay. Oh wow.
And I thought, and I thought, these are actually, I was very competitive. I was very competitive.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to admit that anybody was anything but shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and even my friend Paul, and I remember like thinking, you know, these are fucking catchy songs. I can't deny that these songs are actually pretty good.
Mm.
But it didn't really sound that great. I mean, Paul and Gene became good at their instruments, but this is real. This is 1973 or 72.
Yeah. Early days still, right?
Yeah, they're not, neither one of them, and Peter's not playing like killer drums. Um, and finally, so they play the songs, they put their guitars down, and we start talking again. And now the three of them, especially Paul, the three of them are really pissed off. And the door suddenly bursts open, and this guy walks in with like a cheap guitar case. He's got one red Converse and one orange Converse, and he's walking at a tilt. He's like leaning like the Tower of Pizza, and he breaks out. He has a cheap guitar, a coronet, which I now own and love, and they're now
Yeah.
worth
I've
10.
seen pictures of him rehearsing with that guitar. You're right. Yeah.
When he, back in 1973, that was like literally like a $70 guitar.
Like a Moss, right? Like same kind of thing.
It was just a
Yeah.
piece of junk. It isn't. It's a fabulous guitar. In fact, I bet Ace wishes he still had it. Like I said, I have one and I'm really thrilled
Yes.
with it. But at the time, it was like, oh my God, he's playing a coronet. It was like, gee, that's pretty lame. That's points against him.
Yeah.
So they did. So it was like, okay, let's do the same three songs again. And this time they did the same three songs with Ace, and everything changed. It was like all of a sudden everything made sense. All of a sudden, Paul and Gene sounded like good guitar players and bass players. Nothing was. It's like it was weird. He like made Ace made everyone else sound better. I mean, it was like the whole thing, and it like kind of like it was like a meld. It just like went and I was sitting there like going, and again, I'm a guitar player and I'm a good guitar player and I'm a competitive guitar player. So there was part of me that was going, I kicked this guy's ass.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
another part of me was going, this guy's exactly right for these songs. His simple sort of Paul Kossoff style lead guitar works for these songs perfectly. So they play the three songs. It's like, Paul like goes, hey, let's go into the hallway. So I say goodbye to Gene and a nice meeting you, Ace and Peter, and walk out. And Paul said, so what do you think? And I go, that's your guy.
Yeah.
You found
And
the right.
was that clear, right? Was that evident
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the
It was like,
change in the sound from before and
yeah,
after?
yeah, you don't have to, and he wasn't, and their music, they auditioned Bob Kulick, and I knew Bob was a sweet guy, but Bob was
Yeah, very choppy, right?
that doesn't work with Kiss. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? That kind of like speed demon shit that doesn't work with Kiss. That's what
Yeah.
works with Kiss.
Bends, big bends, yeah, two
So
string.
I said, this is your guy. And I said, if you could get him to like show up on time, that would be a good thing. And he said, well, that's why while you and I are out in the hall, because I'm about to go in there and rip flesh from his bones because this
Yeah.
is bullshit. If you want to be in this band, you show up on time. And he said, I don't want you here when I do it. And I said, I don't want to be here when you do it. And that we shook hands. He was happy with my assessment. And
Sure.
he went back in and reamed Ace, and I went home.
Well, it's funny because you can tell that Paul really respected your opinion and respected you as a musician. And as you say, that's why you were asked to be there. You would give him a no bullshit. You were a friend he
Well,
could trust, who wouldn't just go, "Oh yeah, he's great," and just change the subject. You actually listened, and for you to be able to differentiate between your own opinion and what's best for Kiss is exactly what they needed. So I mean, that's fantastic.
here I got it.
It must have been pretty cool to be hear the change between
Yeah, oh yeah, it was. It was amazing. It was because it was really. I mean, it was like substantial. It was like, whoa.
yeah,
Here's a tidbit. One of the big bonding issues with me and Paul really early was we were both into the move. And the move.
Jeff Lynne.
No, before Jeff Lynne, like
Oh,
the
pardon me. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
first,
interrupt.
yeah, the original quintet, and they were they were like, you had to be, I mean, I'm going to sound like a bragging, but you had to be on top of your shit. You had to be really, really into it. You had to be really like, like paying attention to even know who the fuck the Move were. because the move they had nothing. They had no releases in America, and they were one of my favorite bands. And when Paul, I remember Paul saying, "Yeah, I'm really into the Move," and I just like went, "Wait a minute!" Like,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. Like
I can't even just
out of thin air, right?
I can't come up with like how amazing that would be. I mean, like who name one of your favorite like lesser known drummers, like a drummer's drummer.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good. Oh, geez, that's a good. Let me think about that one. You can put me on the spot, Binky. Um, yeah. I
Well,
mean, there's
let's say Terry Bozzio. Let's
pardon
just say,
me. Yeah,
let's just say,
Terry Bo's an amazing player. Yeah.
right. So it's like if you were talking to another drummer and he goes, "Yeah, I'm really into Terry Bozzio," you'd like go, "Whoa, dude!" Like
Yeah, because he's so
it's like it's kind of like out of
it's
nowhere.
not Bonham
And
or Neil Peart
Paul
or
actually, a couple of years later, Paul said, I stole the idea of Firehouse from the Move's Fire Brigade,
oh
uh,
wow.
which it's I mean it's Paul's a completely different song, but
Yeah, that makes sense. Fire Brigade, Firehouse, which
called
would
the
be the English and American versions of the same kind of thing, right?
buildings really stop to burn. Yeah. So that was that. It's like it's funny how a little thing like that can. I mean, this is. I bring this up because it's a little thing like the two of us loving the Move that made me the guy he wanted to run by. Who he wanted my opinion on Ace
Mm.
because we both loved the Move, and not. I mean, it was a dozen other things, but that kind of thing where it was like we both look. I remember we both looked at each other like, "Whoa, another Move
Yeah.
guy," because there
You
were. I
knew you would give an accurate and honest answer because you had things like that in common. You had the same kind of mindset. He knew that if he asked you, you would tell him a good and honest answer. I'm assuming, right? So that's fantastic. I mean,
I was, yeah. I mean, I knew that the guy, whoever they were trying out was.
you mind me asking, Vicky, if it's not too personal, do you miss that friendship at all? Is it?
I, we reunited in 2012 and had a really lovely year of talking on a regular basis. He called me up one day and said, "Listen, my son Evan is coming into New York to visit NYU and Cooper Union. Uh, would you be willing to take him around to guitar shops?" So I I was I spent 2 hours with Paul's son Evan. I mean, that was again, that's the kind of relationship we had. Paul trusted me with his fucking kid. The kid was
Of course.
15. He's a 15-year-old boy.
That's wild. That shows you right there how highly he thinks of you. The
So
most treasured possession in the world is his family.
what happened? This kind of sucks. But what happened was during one of my phone calls with him when we reunited, I said, "By the way," I said, "I need to tell you something, or I need to say something." I said, "The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has fucked you over for 14 years. You should have gone in the first year you were eligible. You're one of the top 5 bands in the world, and they're not putting you in." I said, "When they do finally get around to inducting you or nominating you, you need to fucking tell them to go fuck themselves. You need to say Kiss doesn't need the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
We have an army. We have an army, okay?"
Yeah, yeah, a literal army. Yeah.
And so and Paul was very taken aback. He was like, "Whoa, what? Really?" And by and I sort of I mean I spent like a minute on it going, "Here's why you should." You're da, 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 da. And by the end he was kind of intrigued. Anyway, they got inducted. They accepted. They went in. And a couple of months after their induction, I wrote an editorial on Huffington Post, and the title was "Kiss Blew It." And the first 4 paragraphs were me going, they should have told them to go fuck themselves. They could have made t-shirts that,
Yeah, yeah,
we don't need no stinking Hall of Fame. We've got an army. I said, it's just, these guys were marketing geniuses. I can't believe they missed the opportunity to like shove Kiss up Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's ass. And then once I was done with that, the next like 20 paragraphs, because it was a long article. The next 20 paragraphs or so, 15 paragraphs, was just an outright love letter to Kiss. I mean,
of course, yeah,
I'm a Kiss fan. I mean, I think, I mean, I honestly, I think most of their stuff is not good, but the good stuff, and the good stuff for me is about 30 songs,
yeah,
spread out over the.
yeah.
I did not like, except for Tears Are Falling. I was not into the no makeup years. I thought those were
They lost me too after Lick It Up. The same thing. I
well,
understand exactly what you're saying.
they,
It was an occasional. Tears of Falling is a great song, occasional good one, but mostly it was they were
yeah,
trying to be something they weren't. I feel,
yeah. Well, you know what it was? Here's I can tell you. I Paul and I got together. This was in '78, and he said we're gonna be taking the makeup off, and I said, well, Kiss, the songs and the makeup. I mean, it kind of goes together. I mean, what are you going to do? And he says, oh, we're going to write songs like the Scorpions. I said, you want to sound like the Scorpions? And he said, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like going, well, the Scorpions are kind of generic to begin with. Why do we need another Scorpion? I mean, I didn't give him shit, but I just was like, I'm not sure about this. And then, as we both agree, that kind of lost years. I mean, like I said, Tears Are Falling is a great song. There's probably 2 or 3 others, but at any rate, um, I wrote this love letter to Kiss, but I started it out with the headline "Kiss Blew It," and then the give it.
yeah. And then that was what was focused on, right?
So Paul sends me the day that it goes up on Facebook. I mean, on Huffington Post. Paul sends me an email and it says, "Stay away from the espresso machine," which I thought was a funny way of saying, like, you crazy bastard. I mean, that was like perfect. I was like, thank you. And I wrote him back and I said, I am so glad that that's your reaction, because it occurred to me once I put it up that this might upset you. And I didn't want to upset you. I mean, anyway,
And he has been known to be sensitive. Let's be honest, right?
a couple of hours later, I get another email from him. You are the textbook version of familiarity breeds contempt. I
Oh,
and blah 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 blah, and and just like, I don't want anything to do with you. Goodbye. And I wrote him and I said a couple of things. I said, your marketing, you and Gene are marketing guys. Kiss Blew It is pure marketing. It was how I got people to read the goddamn article. And if you did read the article all the way through, you know that it was a love letter. I gave you shit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that was the first 4 paragraphs. Anyway, and then I said, do me a favor, have your wife read it. She's a lawyer.
yeah.
Have her read it. Um, anyway, I never heard from him again. Uh, there's I haven't touched on another negative thing that maybe you want to do the next, but uh,
Well, yeah. Let me just say this. I admire you for having told him before this article the same thing. It's not like you had never
well,
said it to him.
I didn't spring it on him. He
It
knew
wasn't like you're publicly slamming Paul Stanley. You were expressing a viewpoint that you had expressed to him. And to me, this is me speaking, like knowing a little bit of the inside of workings of Kiss as I do. I know people that work for them and things. This is textbook Paul Stanley being overreactive and perhaps a tad too sensitive.
Yeah, no,
You
you know
should
what
recognize that, this much of the article was like you say, a love letter, and this much was just honesty that wasn't even really that. It's not that you were hitting below the belt.
Do you know what I call him? I call it the sorest winner in rock and roll.
can see your point with the story you just told. I mean,
Well, and there's another, they were doing the solo albums, and Paul calls me up and he goes, we just wrote the goddamn last album, whatever it was. I forget what it was. Was it Love Gun? What was the one before the no, not Love Gun. It was after Destroyer. They did the 4 solo albums, and he said,
yeah.
I'm completely tapped out. I have no idea. I have nothing. Can you come over and
It was
help me?
after Love Gun. It was after Love Gun. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, can we write some songs together? So I went over to his house, and to make the story short, I wrote the chorus of Hold Me, Touch Me, not the lyrics, but the music. And I wrote the intro and middle breakdown of Love and Chains. And he didn't give me credit. And it ended our relationship. It ended our friendship. And
So that was the first kind of parting of the
well,
ways. Then you made up a little later on.
I had a music publisher, and I didn't bother telling him because it was my friend Paul, so I didn't have anything to worry about. So I mean, Gene was shocked when Gene found out what had happened. He was just out. He was really like disgusted. Anyway, what happened was Paul realized that he had fucked up, and he came to a Planets gig, and and somebody said, "Ooh, Paul Stanley's here." Like, "Ooh, there's a rock star here."
Yeah.
And I went, and I said,
You're thinking my friend, never mind rock star. Yeah.
where is he? And they said, "Oh, he's at the end of the bar." And I walked over to him, and I said, "What are you doing here?" Like, pissed off. And he went, "I made a mistake." And I said, "Yes, you did." And he said, "I need you to come to my business manager's office tomorrow. I need to rectify this mistake." And I said, "Okay, all right." And he said, "By the way, the band sounded great." And he left. The next day, like 2 in the afternoon, I got to Howard Marks's office. Howard Marks wound up ripping them off for like $10 million. But
I did read that. Oh God.
at the time, he was their business manager. And so Paul and I go into Howard's office, and Howard says, Paul says that you had something to do with writing some of the stuff on his solo album, and he made a mistake and didn't give you credit. I don't really believe it. I don't think you did have anything to do with it. It was like, what is, I just said, I didn't give a fuck with this asshole, this fucking fat.
But you were invited.
Yeah, when Paul is standing behind him, and Paul sort of rolls his eyes like, don't worry. And he goes, "Paul and I hope that this makes things better puts the two of you back on track together." And he handed me a check for $5,000. And in 1978, that was like handing me a check for $13,000. I mean, right now, if you'd have to hand me $13,000 to get, I mean, it was like mind blowing. I mean, it was like when he said, I thought maybe Paul was going to give me an Ibanez Iceman. That's like what I was thinking.
Wild, man.
That was like the level of like forgiveness, beg forgiveness. Anyway,
yeah,
he gave me $5,000, and that made things better. But we were never quite the same. And then the next thing that happened, and this one actually makes me angrier than the solo stuff, because Love and Chains and Hold Me, Touch Me are not very good. I mean, but Paul needed a drummer, and he called me up and he said, I've just written a song. I want to do a demo of it right away. My drummer friend I usually use on demos is out of town. Would it be okay for me to call Steve? You're the Planets drummer. I said, yeah, fuck yeah. Here's his number. So Steve goes to Electric Ladyland, and Paul and Steve, and they're a recorded demo, and they're in the same they're in the same studio in Electric Ladyland that they cut Dressed to Kill in. And
Okay.
and so Paul calls me up and he says, "Listen, we're still at Electric Ladyland. I'd love you to come down and hear what we've got, because this is like my favorite song." So I come down and he plays it, and it's good. And he said, "You know what?" He goes, I don't know what the fuck to do on the bass. I've got no idea for the bass whatsoever. Do you want to give it a try?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went into the studio and put on headphones, and they ran the song down about 3 times. And I had a rented Fender Precision bass in my hands, and I came up with a bass line, and I ran it down for Paul. He was like, "Oh, I love it. Okay, so let's do a cut. Let's take it. Let's do a take." We do the whole song all the way through. I don't fuck up once. And Paul's like thrilled. "Oh my God, I love that bass line." Anyway, the fucking song was Love Gun. And the next time you hear Love Gun,
Yeah, that's a classic bass line.
that whole the bass line is note for note totally me. And then in Kisstory, Paul, one of the songs on Kisstory is the Kiss demo with me on bass. And Paul and his blurb for the song is, "I'm really proud of the bass part I came up with for this song."
Jesus, that must have been like a knife in the heart.
No, it wasn't that important. It was more like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What
Yeah.
you are a multimillionaire. You tour the world. You have fucked 1,100 girls. I'm a schmuck who didn't make it. You can't fucking throw me a bone. You can't give me credit for the credit I deserve. I wrote the goddamn bass part. You didn't.
That is
Anyway,
wild. Wow.
that's anyway. So what I said to him when he wrote me that note about um, you're the textbook of familiarity breeds contempt. When I wrote him back, I said, maybe you can cut me some slack, since I cut you slack over Love Gun and touch me and Love in Chains. And that just what I did there was I guaranteed he'd never write me again.
That's
But
like a little twist of the knife.
but come on, like, you're ending 45-year friendship over because it wasn't even the article. It was
Yeah.
the headline, dude.
It was that issue.
It
Okay.
was, it was no, it wasn't even the shit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It
Yeah.
was that I had a headline on the Huffington Post that said Kiss blew it, and he
Yeah.
could not abide that. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like, dude, come on, we accept you, one of us, one of us. Gotta
That
gotta be.
I have to ask you, was he always like that? Like in terms of
No, no, not
insecurity?
at all, not at all. No, he was. No, I don't know. I think I don't know what happened. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened. The when I got my copy of his solo album and my name wasn't in the credits,
That must have been rough.
I was no, it was I was I don't even I'm trying to think of how to. I was flabbergasted. I was just like, it was so unexpected. I mean, we were such friends. We were so tight. It
Yeah.
was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that to anybody? But why would you do that to me? It just was like, he wound up giving me $13,500. You know,
Jesus, man.
but
Binky, may I ask, just to get it out of the way, do you think that there's a chance that maybe I won't say forgot, because I got to give him more credit than that, but somehow convinced himself that he came up with it? Like, you think it could have been what he thought was an honest mistake? Or do you really believe that it was just, as it seems to be,
well,
his insecurity shining through?
if he'd been shooting heroin for 8 or 9 years, I'd say
Fair enough.
but no, Paul is
It
Paul.
wasn't Nate. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
The
Paul's a
guy's
smart
razor
guy. Yeah.
sharp. Guy's razor sharp, man. Fuck, a glass of wine is like him going crazy.
Yeah.
No, he's
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, Ace lost brain cells. Peter lost brain cells. Gene and Paul did not lose brain cells.
Yeah, fair enough. That's perfect answer right there. But at this point, I'm going to have to stop the recording, but I'm going to ask you on behalf of people everywhere, not just for the Kiss aspects. I really want to talk more about the planets and your guitar collection and your career. Would you consider coming back for part two?
I'll come back for part two with gladly, especially since I haven't told you how Pete Townsend threw me his guitar.
That's on the list. And the list is the longest my arm of all the cool stuff that you've been involved in. I wanted to talk to you about. So we can do that then?
Yeah.
Okay, Binky, thank you so much, my friend. You are a legend. Even if you don't think so, I and others do. I anoint thee. I'll be in touch with you. We'll set up a time that works for you.
That scene in Repo Man where Emilio Estevez pours the beer on the floor and Harry Dean Stanton says, normally I'd put your lights out, but you're okay. That's you.
Thank you, my friend. Cheers to you. I will be in touch, and thank you so much for your time, Binky. This has been absolutely mind-blowing.
Oh, I'm thrilled. It's great that you're happy.
Now we'll talk soon. I can't wait to ask you more about your experiences. And this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
You got it, man.